Madam Chair, we can run through the agenda real quick, and then food is in the table rock.
Fantastic. Let's go ahead and call the work session to order. And Josh, I'll just turn it right over to you.
Okay, perfect. So fairly short agenda tonight. Number one is a ratification of findings. Those are not public hearing items, so that can be done right after the consent agenda. Number two, on North 20th Street, we will hear that one. Number three, we would propose for consent.
Any objections or comments about item number 3 being on consent? Okay, great. Let's put that on consent.
Okay. And then we will hear number 4.
Excellent.
Okay.
Are there any questions for Josh? Okay, great.
All
We'll
right.
go ahead and adjourn this very quick work session, and we'll be back at 6.
Okay, perfect.
Good evening. Today is the 27th of June, 2022. This is the scheduled time and place for the Historic Preservation Commission meeting. I'm Vice Chairperson Montoto, and I now call the meeting to order. Christina, could you please call the roll?
Otter. Kintai.
Here.
Malloy.
Here.
Weaver. Montoto.
Here.
Maroney.
Here.
Koski. Pape.
Here.
5 present, 3 absent.
Thank you. Have all commission members had a chance to review the minutes from the May 23rd, 2022 meeting? Does anyone have any comments or changes to the minutes? Hearing none, I will now take a motion on the May 23rd, 2022 minutes.
I move to approve the May 23rd meeting minutes.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Christina, would you please call the roll?
Kintai.
Aye.
Malloy.
Aye.
Montoto.
Aye.
Maroney.
Aye.
Pape.
Aye.
All in favor. Motion carries.
Thank you. We have one possible item for the consent agenda this evening, and that is item number 3, DRH 22-00190, Amy Allgaier at 1105 West Pueblo Street. Does the commission have any questions on this matter? Is the applicant present?
We are.
Are you in agreement with the recommended conditions of approval?
Yes, we are.
Thank you. Staff, was there any written opposition to this matter? Is there anyone present tonight wishing to testify against this matter? Seeing none, and based on the representation of the applicant and lack of opposition, item DRH 22-00190 will be placed on the consent agenda. I move that the consent agenda and all items on the consent agenda be approved, subject to all the findings and conclusions and conditions of approval agreed upon for this application. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Commissioner Maroney. Christina, would you please call the roll?
Kintai.
Aye.
Malloy.
Aye.
Montoto.
Aye.
Maroney.
Aye.
Pape.
Aye.
All in favor. Motion carries.
Thank you. Our first item this evening is item number 1, DRH 22-00135, Jessica Ripple Felgate. This is a discussion and ratification of findings for approval for an application that was approved at the May 23rd, 2022 hearing. Do I have a motion to accept the ratification of findings?
I move to accept the ratification of findings for DRH 22-00135.
Thank you, Commissioner Malloy. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Commissioner Maroney. Christina, would you please call the roll?
Kintai.
Aye.
Malloy.
Aye.
Montoto.
Aye.
Maroney.
Aye.
Pape.
Aye.
All in favor. Motion carries.
Thank you. We'll move on to the remaining items on our agenda, and we'll start with item number 2, DRH 22-00143, Zeb Leach at 2200 North 20th Street. Josh, can we please have the report?
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the commission. So the applicant has applied to perform a renovation on an existing home, 2200 North 20th Street. It is a contributing property in the expanded north end. It's a corner lot located at the northeast corner of Good Street in 20th, and an alley runs along the rear of the property. Photo of the existing home. It is a minimal traditional with vinyl siding, which is proposed to be replaced. So the applicant has proposed a fairly extensive rehab and remodel, a new single-story garage off the alley, But the subject of the application that brings it here tonight is the modifications to the character defining facade of that contributing structure. So as part of the remodel, the applicant proposes to modify that front elevation in several ways. So there is an existing shed addition on the left side of the elevation there on the existing front elevation. They would incorporate that into the home, eliminate that front facing door and remove that shed roof structure and extend that new siding to encapsulate that portion of the structure as part of the original home. Additionally, they would propose to enlarge the front entry facing the street. The existing concrete steps would be removed. That entry would be widened with new columns. New concrete steps would be poured, and a larger front door would be put in place. From the left side elevation, again showing that shed addition that would be encapsulated and a side gable put in its place as part of this proposal. So looking at the guidelines, we did find that the changes to the front entry were inappropriate. The guidelines recommend reconstructing or maintaining existing proportions and massing and materials on those front entry porches and front porch covers. We do recommend approval of the encapsulation of the existing shed addition. It was likely constructed out of the period of significance. It is an addition to the home, and their proposal would kind of clean up that front elevation a little bit. So with that, I would stand for any questions.
Thank you, Josh. Any questions? Okay, thank you. Is the applicant present?
Can you hear me?
We can. Please state your name and address for the record, and you'll have 20 minutes.
Awesome. My name is Zeb Leach, representing the property owners Taylor Jean Homes and residing at 11910 West Pepperstone Street, Boise, Idaho. The plans we have proposed on this property are what I believe to be a tasteful remodel and lovely addition to the community that is the historic North End. Some of these changes include replacing the current vinyl siding with smooth fiber cement, creating a more harmonious roof line between the strange addition that was added at some point on the east elevation, and adding a 2-car alley-loaded garage in the rear to reduce the on-street parking impact. After reading over the staff review of this project, the property owners agree to fully comply with all site-specific conditions mentioned within, which include the decision to leave the front portico with its existing design and massing, along with adhering to the standard conditions set forth. It is the goal of the property owners to bring back life to this property while providing a beautiful renovation to the community. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Leach. Any questions for the applicant?
I have a question.
Sure, Commissioner Malloy.
Mr. Leach, have you pulled off the vinyl siding at all to see if the original wood siding is underneath?
We haven't pulled it off in totality. I did pull off a brief section just to see if there was anything underneath, and unfortunately it's just plywood.
Okay. Are there any sections that remain that you could base the replacement siding on, like the size and width of the historic siding?
I'm confused what the question was. I'm sorry. Could you repeat?
So is there any siding that's historic that's underneath the vinyl siding besides that little bit of plywood that you saw?
Not that we're aware of, no. Looks like OSB or plywood. I believe that a previous property owner must have ripped it off and put vinyl siding at some point. When that happened, I wouldn't be able to tell you.
Okay. And my second question is, it says that you're gonna paint it gray. Is there a reason why you're going with gray?
That's just what the property owners were suggesting. If there's another color that would be more recognized by the community in a better fashion, then we would be open to that.
Yeah, a lot of the homes, like mid-trad homes, weren't necessarily always painted gray. There's a lot of historic homes that are being painted gray that was not a color choice back then. And it'd be good to see something different. Than versus
Another
the
scheme we
current
were
trend.
working with was the a white with some gray trim. I don't know if that would be more liked.
Yeah, that would probably look nicer, I think.
Thank you, Commissioner Malloy. Any other questions for Mr. Leach before we move on? Okay, great. Thank you. Is the Registered Neighborhood Association here to testify?
Madam Chair, they are not, but they did ask me to read their comments into the record for them. So I'll go ahead and do that now.
Please, thank you.
And this is from Kate Hinwood with the North End Neighborhood Association. As this is a contributing home, we do have a few questions regarding the proposed changes. From exchanges with the applicant, we understand that will be window size modifications to all elevations, but don't see the specific dimensions noted on the plans. From the drawings, it doesn't appear that solid to void ratios will be significantly impacted, but it would be good to get confirmation that this holds true for the front facade. Perhaps on the front, it is only the basement window changing size. The current siding is vinyl and plans call for its replacement, but is there any chance the original siding remains underneath and could be salvaged? Can the proposed small gable roof over the shed extension be non-destructively removed? We agree with staff findings that the porch should remain in its current width. As always, we encourage the use of permeable paving where applicable. Thank you.
Thank you, Josh. We don't have anyone signed up to testify, but are there any members of the public wishing to testify this evening?
Can you hear me?
We can. Please state your name and address for the record, and you'll have 3 minutes.
My name is Erin Hill, and my address is 2122 North 20th Street. I live at the corner of Good and 20th. My one concern is that this property has changed hands so many times as people have tried to divide the property and make some really non-historically contributing, changes to it. And when I first read about the changes and that it would, from my understanding, render the home as no longer historically contributing, that's my one concern, is that if changing the porch size all of a sudden reclassifies this property as historically non-contributing, then it would open itself up to all the changes. And even in the recent attempt to sell the property, Mr. Leach and his group had advertised as, all the potential to split it so many different ways. And so when I read this, my main concern was that this could somehow create a loophole and render it non-contributing. So I really appreciate the attention to detail of the historical preservation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any other members of the public wishing to testify this evening? It doesn't appear so. If the applicant would like, you have 5 minutes for rebuttal, or you can yield your time.
I'll just state just for Aaron that as I stated in my previous statement, that we are choosing to not go ahead and change that front facade, that little portico, and enlarge it. After looking at it and considering it once more, I do agree. Probably making it any bigger would change the overall look of it, and the massing would be a little off. So based off of that, we're proposing to keep it as is and just to replace the siding around it and renovate. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Leach. Any final questions for Josh or Mr. Leach? Okay, with that, I will go ahead and close the public portion of the hearing, and we'll consider a motion or discussion prior to the motion, either one.
I guess we'll open it up for discussion. I don't have too many concerns about the project. I'm always concerned when we're replacing siding if the historic siding is underneath, because a lot of times when we replace the siding, we don't replace it with the appropriate size. siding. So sometimes you have like a larger 6-inch versus a 4-inch, and it does make a difference for these properties. So I wouldn't mind seeing a stipulation if they pull off the plywood and the historic sidings and they're under there, that they look at it and see if they can retain it and repair it versus full sale replacement with the hardy board.
Thank you, Commissioner Malloy. I would be in support of that. I also liked the thought of the paint job. I'm not sure if that's something that we can put in as a condition of approval, but maybe perhaps a strong recommendation to the applicant. If we could, I would be in support of that. But I would also echo, I don't have too many concerns with the project, other than I would like to see the original siding be either matched or salvaged if possible, if it's there. But I am actually relieved to see vinyl siding go on a contributing house. I think that's kind of a win here. So any other members of commission wanting to share thoughts or emotion, perhaps?
I would agree on the siding as well. I think that's the big thing for me, is trying to match the size and at least get it as close as it was before. I think that's a big one for me.
Would anyone like to make a motion?
I can make a motion. So I motion to approve DRH 22-00143 based on the staff's analysis and findings contained within the staff report. In addition, the applicant should make a good faith effort to identify whether the historic siding is underneath the plywood. And if so, if salvageable, repair and retain the historic siding, or replace it with new siding that is the historically appropriate and matches the size of the historic siding.
That is a beautiful motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Commissioner Maroney. Christina, can you please call the roll?
Kintai,
Aye.
Malloy,
Aye.
Montoto,
Aye.
Maroney,
Aye.
Pape,
Aye.
all in favor, motion carries.
Thank you. We'll move on to our final item on the agenda this evening, and that's item number 4, DRH 22-00206, James Howell at 507 East Logan Street. Josh, can we please have the report?
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the commission. So the applicant has requested to change the status of an existing home from contributing to non-contributing at 507 East Logan Street in the East End. It is located just to the east of the St. Luke's campus area, south of Fort, or east of Fort, I'm sorry, at the corner of Avenue D and Logan Street. The existing structure is in a state of significant disrepair. Really no historical elements remain. The materials are severely weathered and compromised on all portions of the building. In reviewing the application materials, reviewing the findings in the ordinance for a change in status, we did find that the property does meet those requirements. Many of the required aspects of historical significance are not intact, including materials, workmanship, and feeling are certainly absent. In addition, it is not individually eligible for the National Register. So with those two findings, the requirements of the ordinance for a change in status, we feel have been met. We have recommended approval of the status change, and I would stand for any questions.
Thank you, Josh. I have a plethora of questions, and maybe the applicant can help answer those. But do you happen to know if there have not been significant changes to the property since the survey has been done, how it achieved contributing status in the first place?
Madam Chair, the The historic survey in your packet, I think does a good job of showing, I mean, the photographs in those usually aren't the best, and it probably isn't the best example either, but does a good job of showing what the condition of this home was when it was surveyed. I think it's fair to say almost unrecognizable from its current state. It really was a pretty nice little home, and I think the survey shows that. I don't, and I think these are probably some good questions for the applicant in terms of what has happened in the meantime in terms of ownership and lack of maintenance, but certainly some significant deterioration has occurred since that photo was taken in the survey.
Thank you. Any other questions for Josh?
I have one question for Josh. What's the process for like demolition by neglect for the city, and why wasn't this notified earlier? Like why wasn't code compliance out there before it got to this current point?
Yeah, Madam Chair, Commissioner Malloy. So demolition by neglect is a proactive process that's really meant to be undertaken before it gets to this point. Code enforcement complaints in the city of Boise are complaint driven. So they are driven by complaints from neighbors, et cetera. I don't know the history of complaints on this property, if complaints were filed and maybe nothing was followed through on them or not. But that demolition by neglect section of the ordinance is really meant to address structures as they are beginning to be neglected when they are salvageable. There's language in there that talks about, if the commission makes a preliminary determination that a resource is being demolished by neglect, it shall direct the Boise City Building Division to notify the owners and kind of start these conversations about how the structure can be saved. So it's kind of, in this case, it would have needed to happen several years ago.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Josh? Okay, is the applicant present?
I am.
Please come forward, state your name and address for the record, and you'll have 20 minutes.
James Howell, 805 West Linden, Boise. So part of the reason it's in that estate, the state's in, I didn't have the money to put into it to fix it or the time. Also, there's another issue with this in a floodplain, and that's determined on MSL, mean sea level. So it might have to be raised, or that's another issue. If you go to get a building permit, it's got to be at a certain elevation. I think it's too low. And I called Josh at the city, and the rule is from FEMA that it's got to be, if you put more than half the value of the house into it, you got to do FEMA standards in a floodplain. And that is a certain elevation. Looking at it, it looks like I heard it's a foot off the street, but they won't tell me it is actually off MSL. So if it's too low, you got to raise it anyway. And the feasibility of raising that old house is really not feasible. When it was originally constructed, they just took one base and stood them on end. That was the outside wall and the inside wall. Then they built the little roof on top of it. Then later on, they built the back piece, and then later on, it looks like they built another piece. So it was built in several different sections, but there isn't a whole lot of structure there to even rebuild. And you may not be able to rebuild it at its elevation. I haven't checked with FEMA, and I've got a surveyor out there to get the elevation of it. But it's got to be a certain elevation or you can't get a permit. And all of those factors involved, I just didn't have the money to put into it. And it has sat there a long time. And I've had to go over there and do maintenance on it and cut the weeds. There has been complaints from the city. And I would just, it's got to the point where I need to get, I actually have it for sale because I still don't have the money to put into it, but I need to do something with it. And part of it is some people, it's in pretty rough shape, and there is some issues with it on the floodplain and stuff. And if it doesn't sell, I'll have to try to rebuild it. But it would be hard to rebuild that house because there's nothing left of it per se. Anyway,
Thank you. We may have some questions for you.
right.
And I suppose I'll open it up to my fellow commissioners for questions before I ask mine. Are there any questions for Mr. Howell? No? Okay. I guess I do have one question, and maybe it's just for clarity. So you're here tonight requesting a change in status for it to be non-contributing. Say that it becomes non-contributing. What's your plan?
Just keeping it marketed, or probably now, my plan is to, currently it's on the market. My plan is to get a surveyor down there and see what the elevation is, see if it has to be raised. If it does, probably tear it down, start over.
And how does that change, this change in status help?
I could tear it down and start over, because I can't, one reason that it hasn't been torn down is, again, I'd be in trouble if I tore it down. So this is, I can't just go and tear it down. Because my understanding is that's breaking the rules. So I didn't want to break the rules. So that's the way it's set. I didn't have the money or the resources to cut. I haven't dealt with it for several years. So now I need to push ahead. I've been saying it for the last 10 years. I need to do something with it. And now is the time I want to try to get something done with it.
Thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Howell? Okay, thank you so much. Is the Registered Neighborhood Association here to testify?
Good evening, Madam Chair and Commissioners. My name is Sheila Grisham. My address is 1204 East State Street, Boise 83712. And tonight I am speaking on behalf of the Easton Neighborhood Association. The house at 507 East Logan, unfortunately, seems to be beyond repair. This is a contributing house to the Easton Historic District, and due to neglect, we will lose another contributing home. The city of Boise has ordinances in place to impose consequences for allowing a contributing house to fall to this state of neglect. There is a section in the Boise City Code that refers to demolition by neglect. In the ordinances, it states that any property owner within a historic district shall be preserved by the owner. If the property is not taken care of and is neglected, the city of Boise can commence legal action against the owners if necessary. It is clear that this house has been neglected for reasons unknown to us. Our concern is that if the consequences for neglect are not followed, and then others could possibly do the same thing, change the status from contributing to non-contributing in order to be able to build what they want. And this is not a precedence that we want to see happen in our neighborhood. At the very least, the old growth lumber and sandstone that are on the garage should be salvaged and used in the rebuild. If not this rebuild, it should be salvaged for another home. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. We don't have anyone signed up to testify, but are there any members of the public tonight wishing to testify this evening? It doesn't appear so. Mr. Howell, if you'd like, you have 5 minutes for rebuttal, or you can yield your time.
So part of the neglect was due to financial situations I had. And back in the 10, there was the building industry hit a tank. I'm in construction. That's what I do. And I had no money to put into it. I had to go out of state to work to make a living. So I was out of state for a while during this period. I came back and I had to work myself out of debt from about 10 to 15. It was hard to make money. I had a bunch of bills and I just didn't have the resources or money to put into it. I didn't want to start something I couldn't do. I did have it roughed, and part of it didn't get as much damage as some of it. I did board it up. I have tried to keep the weeds down, probably not as much as I should have, but the house wasn't in great shape when I got it. It was the stoop was all crooked. It wasn't a great house when I acquired it. And there were some issues with it when I had it. I was trying to make it anyway. And it just over time it got deteriorated down. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Any final questions for Mr. Howell? Okay, with that, I will go ahead and close the public portion of the hearing and would love some discussion prior to a motion, if anyone would like to start that off.
I can start it off.
Please, Commissioner Malloy.
It's sad to see another contributing property loss, especially through neglect. And I think neighbors and neighborhood associations should be proactive if they start to see a property fall into disrepair. They need to take action and file a complaint. I know it's not something we love to do, is file complaints against our neighbors, but I think in this case, we should have taken action years ago, or we wouldn't be here now. But I'm open to the idea of salvaging the stone in the back if it's a non-contributing property and there's demolition, but that'll have to be heard at another time. We're just looking at the contributing status. So
Thank you, Commissioner Malloy. Any other discussion?
Commissioners, Madam Commissioner, I think this is an unfortunate situation for all the reasons listed, right? We hate to see our historic homes go. You've had a rough go of it. Like, it's hard to invest money in a home and not be able to do the upkeep. You are going through the process, the rules, the way you understand them. I live in a historic home in the floodplain, and it's a really unique situation in the city of Boise. There's like 11 contributing homes in the floodplain. And he's right, you can't invest more than 50%, or I forget what the percentage is, of the home's value in repairing the home on a 10-year rolling basis. And so once it gets past a certain tipping point, you can't get insurance if you are putting too much money into it. And so the city code also, and the FEMA codes kind of, and the historic codes are a little at odds, and they're not very clear. And so it does make like a muddled process to try to do things to the homes that are historically contributing that need to be done a certain way that also happen to be in the floodplain. So it's kind of like there's a lot of moving pieces in this that have contributed to the unfortunate situation that it is, but it is what it is now. And I don't see anything else that we can do with it.
Thank you, Commissioner Maroney. Any other discussion? Would anyone like to make a motion?
all right. I move to approve DRH 22-0026 based on the staff's analysis and findings contained within the staff report.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Christina. Do I have, can you call the roll, please?
Otter. King Tai,
Aye.
Malloy,
Aye.
Montoto,
Abstain.
Baroni,
Aye.
Pape,
Aye.
all in favor, motion carries.
Thank you. That concludes our hearing for tonight. Thank you all for coming, and we will see you July 29th? 25th, July 25th hearing. Thank you all.